For you older guys and gals out there, do you remember when you first got into Sasquatch or Bigfoot? When you first started reading the books and the reports, and how your excitement built as you found yourself getting behind all of it? Remember thinking that you wanted in as much as possible? Because surely this thing was going to be brought out of the woods at any moment, and you wanted to be a part of it. That was 20 years ago for me, and I'm still waiting for the creature to be brought out of the woods at any moment. That has not happened yet, and that it hasn't happened yet is a disappointment. But I still have faith, backed by a modicum of evidence to keep me hanging in there. But I have to question whether or not Sasquatch or Bigfoot research will be able to hang in there. Why? Because the very people who are its strongest proponents are the very ones who are destroying it. Harsh criticism or harsh reality? Let's get it on. This is West Coast Sasquatch Research. Welcome, one and all. I'm your host, Gerry Matthews. Now, there are those who think that the Bigfoot Sasquatch research is in grave danger. I don't know if I tend to agree with them or not. So, in this podcast, we're going to take a look at the Bigfoot Sasquatch community and what perils, if any, that we might find there. And we have just the crew on board to take on this task. The Bukwas Crew. Thomas Steenburg, myself, and Bill Reid. So let's get on with it. Okay, guys, this October, it will be 54 years. 54 years since Bluff Creek. And we're no closer to solving the mystery now than we were in September of that year. Now you say, wait a second, we got the PG film. Yes, but it's a film that until this very day cannot be agreed upon as proof for Sasquatch. So all things being equal, thinking about this, I think the question has to be put out there. Will Sasquatch research have a shelf life? Now, what I mean by that, are certain people slowly squeezing the life out of the phenomena of Sasquatch? By their very involvement, are they keeping the only people who can truly solve this mystery, in my opinion, the scientists? Are they keeping the scientists marginalized by their antics? Is there much needed outside scientific input held back because of the atmosphere of the Sasquatch world? In other words, good scientists that we need wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole because of the people involved in it. So my question is, as we go along all of these years, decades on our merry way, are there nails being driven into the coffin lid of Sasquatch research? Is the clock ticking for Sasquatch research? And before we get in, listeners, before we get into the conversation any more deeply, I'll just pause for a second and ask my amigos here, do they have any knee-jerk reaction to what I just said before we carry on?
You go ahead first there, Thomas, then I'll say my piece.
All right. No, in my opinion, I don't think there's nails being driven into the coffin of Sasquatch research, but Sasquatch research has definitely been pulling towards the inmates running the asylum more than anything else. And that, for more than anything, has kept, I think, legitimate scientific research from even taking an interest in this sort of thing. I see some signs that it's getting worse. I see signs that hopefully that the inmates running the asylum will be pulled in different directions completely away from the Sasquatch, because quite frankly, the Sasquatch is probably too boring for them. So, no, in my opinion, it's basically the same state as it always was. There's just a lot more people doing it.
Is that a good thing? I think the status quo is still the same as it was 50 years ago.
Yeah,
I don't see any great improvement going on.
Oh no, we're still trying to answer question one, right? So it's still the same, and there's just a lot more people spinning their wheels. And of course, when I refer to the inmates running the asylum, or as other people call it, the woo. Let's face it, most of those people don't want to see it solved anyway. They like it the way it is. They love the endless merry-go-round of ends never meeting, and they can go around pretending to be Mulder and Scully. I mean, there's all kinds of people like that. It's not just Sasquatch field or cryptozoology in general that has this problem. It's almost everything. There's a lot of strange people.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of strange people. And you say you don't believe there's any nails in the coffin. I don't know. 4 come to mind with me. And seen in a new light, the light of, maybe Sasquatch research does have a throwaway before opening date on it. I don't know. But these nails seen in a new light are more than just annoyances. They're deadly. They're deadly. With any research program, I think they're deadly. And they are hoaxers, fringe believers, Sasquatch and the paranormal, and the cult of the misinformed, probably the worst of them all, And anyway, let's get back to that question a little later on. I wanted to hear what you had to say about it, Bill. What's your knee-jerk reaction?
Well, my knee-jerk reaction is that it's more of the same. It's the same as it always been. Like, we've always had some scientists like Vladimir Markov that were, into the study for scientific sake, and I think we still have that. Part of the problem with now, and I won't mention his name, but there's at least one scientist that's high profile that I think is doing it more for the fame and money than he is for the pure science. But I think I'm a little bit agreeing with Thomas, where he thinks, the hoaxers may have been ruining it. I think that some of the good scientific studies that have happened are, if anything is going to be the nail, it's going to be them. I mean, when you look at something like the Bluff Creek Project, I have all the respect for those guys in the world. Like, a great, great project, and they've been doing it for 15 years, and they've come up with nothing Sasquatch related. And they've had some really good other discoveries, but nothing Sasquatch related. When you look at Brian Sykes' genetic study, some of the stuff that some people would have betted on came from Yetis. When they actually did the site or the study, they were bears. So I think, as we get the good scientific studies, and there are some good ones out there, and they're still doing it now when they're doing, when they've done eDNA testing where supposed sightings happen, and they've only done it once or twice to my knowledge because of the expense, but it's come up with nothing. I think it's the scientific research coming up with nothing that will eventually lead the nails in the coffin, because there's always been the fringe believers, there's always been the hoaxers, and Sasquatch has, I mean, the day they coined Bigfoot, there was people pretending to running around with their foot stompers. So hoaxing that has been on for 50 years at least, and it's continuing to go on. But I think the more scientific approaches that have gone out there and are yielding, either results that are negative, such as historic, hair samples, or scalp samples that are showing up to be yak or bear. All of this is just going to convince science more and more that there's nothing there.
Yeah, but this is misidentification. Much of what you just spoke about is mainly misidentification of species or what have you. But it's the people who are involved in the research, and I shouldn't say research because there are some people who are researching. There are many others who are just into it for their own gain.
Some of it's misidentification, but I know one of the Yeti samples that Sykes did, it was a supposed stuffed Yeti. That the story was that it was a Yeti that had been killed and stuffed, and it had been displayed as a Yeti for decades. Well, it never was. And I think you're right. Some is misidentification, but I think the hoaxing has been going on for 54 years, and I don't think it, for any of the true scientists, I don't think it's been a big thing. What I think is more to the detriment, or a bigger nail in the coffin, is in fact lack of evidence. Excuse me, lack of evidence that has come forward.
Well, hence my putting the question out there: does Sasquatch research have a shelf life? Will one day it just cease? Will it just cease to be? You know, and I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no, there'll always be, like Bill says, there will always be the circle of fans out there. Even if Sasquatch is declared official on some official capacity as being nothing but myth and mythology, you always have your core believer, because to them it's like almost like a religion. So they want to believe in it so badly, and they'll continue to do so, right?
So yeah,
and it's like what Bill was saying, legitimate scientific interest, even though very lacking, may one day put an end to it, in at least in the realm of the zoological researcher. People like me who think that if the Sasquatch exists, it's just a higher primate out there in the wilderness areas of North America, right, and other places. But eventually they may say, well, okay, it's probably just myth and mythology. I'm going to go on with something else the rest of my life. But for the inmates running the asylum, they'll go on forever. They don't care what I just say.
Or, as I would think, just to play the devil's advocate, if Sasquatch is proven to be a total myth tomorrow morning, I don't think the hoaxing would stop.
No, because that's all part of the inmates running the asylum. That's all put together, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's the need to hoax, Thomas? What do you think the need to hoax is? Now, we just laid out cards and turned them over, and no matter which way you turn the card, there are people going to hoax. So,
keep notoriety, keeping the merry-go-round turning.
Yeah.
It's sort of the.
I mean, we still get people claim to see Elvis all the time.
Oh, sure.
Because they just won't accept he's gone.
He's gone?
Yeah.
Gee, I didn't know that, Thomas.
Yeah.
So to go back a step, Gerry, I think, it is quite possible that, if the status quo continues on, that 50, 100 years, Sasquatch might be thought of like the fairies or the Banshee or many European legends, and it may become just mythology and folklore, given if it goes on like this. And as far as what drives people to hoaxing, I think there's a lot of different reasons. I think some people do it for their 15 minutes of fame. Some people think they're so much smarter than everyone else. So when they go to hoax, they don't want the hoax to ever be discovered, because they'd rather sit back and tell a few of their friends, look at the hoops I'm making these guys go through. They're so stupid. I'm so smart. Look at me. And then there's some proponents that think when they're hoaxing, that what they're doing is is a good thing because it's showing evidence for what they believe in. So I think we sometimes oversimplify the whole hoaxing thing. We automatically think it's the guy that wants the 15 minutes of fame, but I think there's other things involved. Some people do it for profit. Some people do it for laughing. And quite frankly, when we get later on when we talk about the mission hoax, that 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 story, when you do the whole story, never intended to be the big hoax it was. It all started off as a practical joke.
Tell us about it.
Sure, okay. So what this is back in 1977, and what happened was there was a bus driver. We used to have, well, you're aware of old Cascade bus lines that used to drive from Chilliwack
Yep.
to Vancouver. Well, the driver, Pat Lundquist, he was a Sasquatch enthusiast, and quite often when he drove down Highway 7 there, he would talk about some of the historic sightings. And there was one kid, and when I say kids, these kids were in their late teens, early 20s, because there ended up being 4 of them. But the one kid, he had heard this story a number of times because he had family members that lived out there that he used to visit. And he thought, wouldn't it be funny to do a practical joke on this guy? So what he did is he gathered up 3 friends, and in Maple Ridge, there used to be a shop called Crack a Joke, and they had a gorilla suit in their window. So they went and they bought the gorilla suit. And what they did is they went, and I believe it was Rennie Hinden's book. They opened it up, and there was a life-size picture of a track that Rennie had found, and they built a wooden foot stomper based on that track. And so they went up to this area the day before and put a few footprints in the dirt. And then what happened was they had one guy was riding the bus, and then they had another guy parked at the side of the road in a pickup with his hood up, and he had a walkie-talkie. And his job was, and this was by Lake Erock, and he had a walkie-talkie. Then they had the other 2 were just off this other end of this field. One had a walkie-talkie, and one had a suit. And the idea was that when they drove past the truck, he would radio to the other guy and say, "They're here." And then the guy in the gorilla suit would run out across the field. And then the kid on the bus was supposed to yell, "Hey, there's a Sasquatch," or "Hey, what's that?" Whatever it was. So what happened is the bus goes by the truck, the guy radios, the kid in the suit runs out. Well, somebody else on the bus saw it first and said, "Hey, let's look at that." And then the bus driver did something they totally didn't expect, which was he slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the bus, and went to chase down this Sasquatch. And in his story, and Pat Lundquist, not only was he an enthusiast, but he was also an auxiliary Vancouver City Police. So that gave sort of some credence to what he was saying. So he said he got within about 20 feet of it, and he said that it was big and smelly, and that I think he was 6'2" or 6'3", and he said what he saw was bigger than him. Well, I think the kid that was actually wearing the suit was about 5'9", 5'10". So I mean, he was smaller than Lundquist, but and the kid ended up getting away. So, and again, this was only supposed to be a practical joke. And how I know that is one of the guys involved in the hoax was actually a cousin of a very good family friend. So anyways, they ran off, they got away, and they thought that was going to be it. Well, then what happened is, the Pat Lundquist, basically made sure the world knew about this. The RCMP got involved. Rennie DeHinden. And Rennie DeHinden was actually, he was a believer at first, and he was quoted as saying, if this is a hoax, we need to learn how they did it. And I think John Green didn't believe it from the start, but I'm not sure about that. So anyways, the RCMP were involved, and all these people got involved. And these kids sort of went like, holy crow, this is not what we were expected. And they thought that, they might go to jail over this. So they actually contacted one of their parents had a lawyer. So they contacted a lawyer that then contacted Jack Webster. Do you remember Jack Webster?
Certainly.
Okay. So then they
Scottishman.
contacted Jack Webster and said, hey, we can do the interview. And I guess it was what about a week later, Thomas, when they did the interview?
Well, at first it happened when Jack Webster was interviewing Green on the whole matter, and it came forward during just after that, and Webster did another interview with them, I believe.
Yeah, and they basically, said it was just a hoax. And the thing with it, and this is where my friend comes in. I mean, this is back in '77, and this Corey, who was one of the guy's cousins, him and my middle brother, they'd been friends since kindergarten. I think Corey was probably at the time in grade 2 or something like that. I remember when it happened, and Corey was right on, that was pretend, that was my cousin. And we all, us older kids, because I think I was in grade 6 or 7 then, we laughed at him and said, oh yeah, of course it is, Corey, And then a week later, it's announced that, yeah, it's a hoax, and, the little bugger was right. But what happened was how I first met Thomas, and this is an interesting segue. This was about 8 or 10 years ago. I was on Bigfoot forums arguing with the guy over the mission hoax, and he was a proponent that no, what the hoax was, that there was really a Sasquatch there, and the kids lied. Anyways, Corey was able to get me in touch with his one cousin, and his cousin wouldn't talk to me directly, but he would talk to me over email. And he was quite surprised because he was embarrassed by it. At the time, they just were kids that thought it was a funny joke that blew up in their faces. And he was embarrassed about it. And he actually was surprised that, 30 years later, people were still talking about this. And he hadn't mentioned it for decades to anybody, and he hadn't seen the other 3 guys for decades. So he said he would answer some questions. So him and I were going back and forth, and he was the one that explained to me, it was supposed to be a practical joke on the bus driver that we were all going to laugh about it at the end. And so we started talking about it, and then I said, well, if you want to go and see what's happening, what they think about it now, I put the link onto Bigfoot forums where the discussion was going. After that, I got an email back from him and said, this is crazy. All I did, it was a practical joke 30 years ago. Please don't contact me again. And because he just saw how stupid people were being about that. And to him, it was a huge embarrassment. It was just something that, 4 kids thought was going to be a practical joke, that they were all going to have a, laugh about it after it was over. And it blew into something that they totally did not expect it to be.
But
I may point out, at the time when all this was getting nationwide publicity and it hadn't been revealed as a hoax yet, not everyone on the bus was full. There was a couple from Calgary on the bus named Byrne, who were sticking their heads out the window, yelling at the guy in the costume being chased by the driver. You're not fooling us. And the Burns has said later on, when they heard Pat Lindquist describe, he was taller than I was, it smelled like a sulfur pit and all this and that, they said, it was the dopiest looking costume I ever saw. They weren't fooled at all. But so many other people just wanted it to be real so bad.
That's
and that's the thing. I mean, this was a 70s era gorilla costume that was bought out of a joke shop. So this was not anything high tech. This would be something like when you're watching watching a show and somebody buys rents a goofy gorilla costume for a costume party. This is what it was. It was nothing high tech. It was absolutely bargain bin gorilla suit, and all the footprints were I can't remember now if it was right footprints or left footprints, but it was
Yeah.
just they'd made a wooden trace out of Rennie DeHinden's photo, and that's what they stomped with. So it wasn't even like it was alternating left and right. I mean,
Just
this
hopping
was,
on one foot.
yeah. I mean, there was nothing high tech about this, and even at the time, because Corey had always told me, or even from the get go, that they according to his cousin, it was just a practical joke that
Yeah.
that got out of hand. They never meant it to be that way.
It was the footprints that convinced the late John Green and the late Jim Hukin at the time, who was the other researcher involved, that it was probably not real, because they didn't buy the footprints at all. Rennie was taken in by it. Yeah.
That's harmless fun. That's harmless fun. I think it's pretty cute myself.
Yeah.
They should have made an episode of Corner Gas about that or something. That would be hilarious to watch. The guy in the monkey suit hiding behind a tree, and someone with their head up on the highway sticking out of the bus saying, "We can see you." I mean, there's no malice or personal gain in any of that. They just wanted to play a prank, and it was a darn good prank too.
Yeah.
I mean, if Renee can sell beer, they can run around in a monkey suit. Simple as that.
I think the only victim that was self-imposed, and this was the driver, Pat Lindquist, who basically went dead silent on the whole thing. When no one ever heard from him again.
And it's too good a story, and that's why it's still prevalent today, I believe. Anyway, but that's the harmless kind of hoaxer. But there are worse hoaxers than that out there.
Yeah.
What you had an experience with a nasty kind of hoax on your end, Thomas.
I had an experience with a nasty kind of hoax. I've had a lot of hoaxing. Which one are you referring to?
Yeah. I'll say his name. I don't care. What's he going to do? Take me to Sasquatch court? Good luck on that one, getting a lawyer. Brisson.
Oh, Randy. I won't mention his last name, Brisson. Okay.
Right on.
Yeah, well, that was 2009 where, do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was simply a case of a man who was, in my opinion, suffering from what I politely refer to as Ivan Mark syndrome. It's possible he was getting into research, and he may have been involved in some actual events at first, and it was the center of attention for a while. And when that attention dies down, they start hoaxing to remain the center of attention. And Randy, in my opinion, nice guy, great guy. I liked him a lot. Just let it all go to his head, and he started hoaxing to remain the center of attention, and it worked for him until he got caught. And how he got caught was he was insisting on this trail in Golden Park that Sasquatch was throwing rocks at them all the time, and so he had a whole group from the BFRO came over and spent time and money to coming over, and I was asked to come along. And I have been involved in a couple of earlier incidents with Randy. Well, it seemed legit. One was a set of footprints found on the main road in the snow that he didn't find. Somebody else led them to him, which I still think may be possibly authentic. And then he claimed a sighting with another man. And the other man said, well, it did seem there was something up there, though I never really got a good look at it. But certain aspects of his descriptions, Randy's description seemed had red flags for me, especially when he said it had basically male genitalia almost hanging down to its feet. There was something wrong there. But
Long John, yeah.
yeah. And but what really did it was during this expedition, this one-day expedition, rock throwing. The rocks is a very generous term, more like big marble-sized pebbles. I turned to one in the group and I said, named David Hill, and I said, David, stay back a bit. Don't let Randy get in behind us. I think he's pulling something. So most of the trip, he tried to keep Randy in the middle. Randy would occasionally slip behind, and we had another fellow there named Zoli who was kind of doing his own little show.
Yes.
Yeah, and and the pebble would go up, pebble would go, another pebble would come down. I was expressing it, Zoli got caught because I can't remember her name. Female researcher went ahead of us a little bit, was resting, waiting for us to catch up, and poor Zoli didn't see her, and he did the old kick the rock and give the old, oh, what was that? Oh, where'd that come from? And she was looking right at him the whole time and saw him do what I call the Zoli shuffle. That. But the one thing about it is a lot of times they can't stop themselves. So we're nearly at the end of the trail. I don't know. He just had to get that one last stone in, and I was looking right at him when he flung it right behind his back, and it banged off a tree, which I don't think he meant to hit.
Oh my God, the gang who couldn't shoot straight.
Yeah, but I didn't say anything. We weren't going to say anything. We're going to wait to see what happened with this, to see how far he was going to push it before we exposed it. But it came out on the internet. I think it was David that said, "Oh no, he was throwing rocks." Randy said, "Oh no, I didn't do it. I wouldn't do anything like that. No. Just ask Thomas Stevens. Just ask Thomas Stevens." I'm sorry, Randy. I'm the one that caught you.
Hey,
Yeah,
Thomas. Thomas, you said Zoli was doing the rock throwing.
No. Zoli did a little kicking, like a little what I call the Zoli shuffling. He didn't throw anything. He kicked something on the ground and tried to make it look like it just landed in front of him, thinking no one was looking at him. Yeah.
So you guys witnessed Zoli hoaxing by kicking rocks, and you witnessed Randy throwing rocks and hoaxing on the same trip. That's what you're saying.
And they weren't in cahoots. They were just doing their own thing. I think Zoli believed Randy 100%. And 3/4 of the hike, like it was like 5 kilometers in, 5 kilometers back. He just didn't. Oh, geez, I'm going to get myself in the center or something here. So he did something, and he did his own little thing there. Unfortunately, he did it right in front of her. So that whole thing exploded, and of course, as the years gone by, Randy's had his own little group of supporters and believers.
That's the weird thing about it. People are so forgiving.
Yeah, and well, no, it's just they want it to be true.
Yeah.
We went to a conference that he was hosting in Maple Ridge, Bill and I, and oh my God, you wouldn't believe some of these people, the stuff they were saying. I had to really bite down on my lip, not to yell, not to pull a Renee in the back of the room. You don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, Gerry, it was bad. Like I was, sitting beside Thomas, and Thomas was muttering under your breath, and I honestly thought we were going to have a Renee moment. He was talking under his breath, and I was going like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna have to grab him and pull him out of here."
You won't like me when I'm angry.
And at the end of the conference, Randy comes over to Thomas and says, "Well, what did you think about?" And this whole conference was people doing their woo stories. There was some guy was talking about having glyphs in the dirt with him, and Sasquatch freezing time to do stuff. Like it was a right out there group. When
There's
Randy asked Thomas, "What do you think?" I thought, let's call the cops now. But
yeah.
Thomas's credit, he just smiled and said, "What do you think I thought about it?" And Randy laughed and walked away.
I don't know.
It was the best conclusion we could have possibly had.
The only sane conclusion, yeah, for certain. And I don't know. I can't understand that frame of mind. You have acquaintances and colleagues and friends, your peers that are doing the same thing you're doing, and yet you got to find some way to get one up on them, you know, for your own needs, whatever they might be. I just don't understand that because, to me, I mean, we're all in this together. We should be sharing, maybe not everything, but we should be sharing as much as we can in the way of evidence and what have you. But then that's only human nature, isn't it? I mean, no matter what you get into, you're going to come up against the same kind of situation.
Well, when you get into these people who I call the inmates run asylum, they try to share, but they seem to expect us to go along with their nonsense when we know it's nonsense. And
I should have qualified that by sharing logical, honest information.
And nothing. It's all fantasy stuff.
I mean, my cat brings a lot of stuff in through the patio door that I don't want to share with her.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, or like a religious leader trying to push a faith. It's not that some of these people are lying and just having a good time knowing they're lying. I think some of them really believe they're garbage.
But the other side is, those guys are smarter than us, Gerry, because what Thomas forgets is at that conference, it was a $15 fee to
you had to pay to hear this.
Yeah, and because they had it in the Best Western Hotel in a room there, and ostensibly this was supposed to pay for the conference room, but there was a good between 75 and 100 people in there, and when you figure that we all paid that $15 a piece to see it.
Woo!
I mean, the guy, it was probably cost him $250 for the conference room, and there was no refreshments or anything like that with it. You just went to there, so he probably walked out, $500, $750 in his jeans for doing it.
Oh, there's money to be made in this business.
So, I mean, who are the dummies? The honest researchers that are attending these conferences for free, and guys like Thomas that are any information he has, he gives it to people willingly and free, or the guys that are spewing crap, have 50,000 100,000 subscribers on their YouTube channel,
and that ain't
and pulling in tens of thousands of dollars a year in ad revenue.
And that's never going to change while you're dealing with a subject that you can't even prove exists. That's never, matter of fact, even if you prove it doesn't exist, it's never going to change. If there's a financial way, an emotional way to get what you need out of something, you're going to go ahead and do it anyway. And, the hell with the consequences or the people that might be harmed in any way by it. That's I find that pretty scummy when a researcher is hoaxing. It's bad enough someone doing it just to get a rise, but when someone who's supposed to be a peer or a colleague does it, that's pretty low. The other one I was thinking of is those who just can make sighting happen out of thin air with nothing to back it up whatsoever, and stick to it and believe it like it's religion. I had a case, Thomas was over at my house one day a number of years ago for a barbecue. And till this day, I can't figure out how we learned, but we learned that a colleague of ours who used to appear on a forum that we frequented, she had a sighting. Okay, when was that? Like 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago. Into the Jeep we hop and we drive up to her place, which was only 8-minute drive from my house. And so we went to see her, and she directed us to the back of the house. And she said that she said that I'm not sure if she saw it or her daughter saw it. Maybe you can refresh my memory, Thomas.
I think it was her daughter that saw it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the file in front of me. I have to find it and look it up. But I believe it was her daughter, the girl who saw it, and the girl had company, so there was a friend there as well.
Okay, well, they saw this figure, I'll just call it a figure, step over the back fence, which was a high ornamental iron, I do think, if I recall correctly, fence. It was about 3.5 feet tall anyway. Step over the fence into the yard, walk across the backyard, step over the fence, and on the other side of the fence, there's an embankment that goes straight down to the edge of a golf course. And you can see people playing the holes out there on the golf course. Anyway, we checked the fence, nothing. We checked for footprints in the yard, nothing. We went outside the fence and went down a dusty trail and through some falling wood and what have you. Could not find a single thing out of place. So we went back, and this lady, who was an acquaintance of our colleague, she kept asking the little girl very leading questions. She never said to her, "Okay, tell the gentleman what you saw." No, it was, "Okay, tell them how he stepped over the fence. Tell him how he walked across the yard. Tell them how he stepped over the fence and went down the embankment." And she was leading the narrative. All the way she was leading the narrative, and we could find nothing really to back it up. I mean, what's the dark man, the shadowy figure? What's that? But the mother kept swinging the conversation back that it was a Sasquatch that the girl saw. It wasn't a very tall basketball player. It wasn't a football player. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a Sasquatch. And that's always amazed me. The last podcast we touched on that. Myself and you, Bill, talked about that, about what is it with people that when they come to a strange situation, the first thought in their head is Sasquatch. It's always the first thought into their head. I think that's bad enough, but when you inform other people about it and try to impress them, in my opinion, you better have some evidence to back it up. You don't go public with a sighting unless you're a glutton for punishment. You don't go forward with a sighting in public unless you have corroborating evidence to back it up. And that's just the way I look at it. Otherwise, to me, it seems to be rather suspicious. And
so it was either her coaching the daughter along, which I kind of got the impression on, or the daughter saw some guy in the backyard, and the mother blew it all up into something it wasn't. Because one of the problems that apparently these people are having, it's a nicely wooded area off the golf course in the back of these people's property. They got a big homeless problem back there, I think we concluded at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's no doubt that they probably had people cutting through their yards and everything.
Oh, I'm not disputing that nothing happened. I'm sure something happened.
Yeah.
But I mean, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters or a Sasquatch researcher when someone dark passes through your backyard? That's not my first choice, Yeah. For some people, it would be. But let me ask you something, Thomas. Is it better to cover up this stuff rather than give it an audience? Because obviously that's what they're looking for, is an audience.
No, because if a legitimate true researcher, one of your jobs is to expose hoaxes when you know they've occurred. At least that's the way I look at it. We're not only trying to find evidence of the Sasquatch existence, we also have the responsibility of exposing, well, to put it very politely in politically correct terms, bullshit when we find it. And because it's, when you're interviewing a witness, there's only three possibilities here. Only three. One, they saw a Sasquatch. Two, they mistook something or someone for a Sasquatch. And that's not hoaxing. That just means you actually really believe you saw something. It just turns out not what you thought it was. Or three, they're lying. And,
but okay. But if someone's looking for attention, and a stupid way to get attention, but they're looking for attention, do we make ourselves part of the hoax by promoting the story? by
Not
putting it out there. I mean, to
You
me
are
or
if you
you,
go
to me or
along.
you, yeah, that would be an embarrassment. But to
Yeah.
other people, hey, they're
Yeah.
paying attention to me.
You would be if you're going along with it. And this is the biggest problem with, like I said, it sounds around the inmate. There's so many people call themselves researchers out there who would say, oh, it definitely was a Sasquatch, even though you know damn well it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Or the odds are there could be other explanations. But you want it to be a Sasquatch so badly, you do everything you can to convince yourself in your own mind this person really saw a Sasquatch.
Okay.
When you have alarm bells going off saying, could be this, could be that, could be other explanations. That's what a true researcher should do. But so many the inmates running the asylum, it's Sasquatch, 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 Sasquatch.
Yeah.
There's even a few times I've noticed where people thought, well, maybe I saw something else. And they say, no, you saw a Sasquatch.
You saw it, I tell you.
Yeah, you saw it. Damn it, don't ruin that. Yeah.
But, in that light, is corroborating evidence needed now more than ever? Some kind of corroborating evidence aside from just the anecdotal story that you've been told?
Absolutely. You can't take every anecdotal story at face value, or like I said, we're just pushing their narrative, right?
Yeah.
You have to investigate. You have to find something to back it up, and you have to, like, corroboration. More than one person saw it, then becomes a lot more interesting. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Well, I'm sorry. Go
Jimmy,
ahead, Bill.
I think I'm of two minds of it. I mean, if we want to advance the research, we're going to need something more than anecdotal evidence.
Definitely.
But again, when you have, like, Thomas and I interviewed a gentleman out to Harrison Way a couple years ago that he had no other evidence, but his story, if Sasquatch exists, he saw one, in my opinion, anyways. But even if it was a mistaken identity, I mean, this guy, unless he was an Oscar-winning performance, he saw something, and it did upset him. And I know Thomas and I tried to, and Brad, who was also with us, we tried to calm the guy down and to see the positives in it. But I think those stories are still important, where somebody honestly believes that they saw a Sasquatch. I think it's still important that they bring those stories forward for guys like Thomas that do keep records, because it does at least try to help build up, where some hot spots are and that sort of thing. But I do agree that those anecdotal stories have very limited value now, because there's thousands of them every year.
That's right. And they're all pretty much the same.
Yeah. And for the research to go, we need that extra evidence. I disagree with Leon a little bit from Okanagan Bigfoot. And I have a whole bunch of respect for him. He always says tracks are facts. I don't believe that, because unless you have strong evidence what made those tracks, you are still making assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
But tracks with dermal ridges and 150, 200 tracks or whatever going in a pathway that you can follow, that wander around like a real animal does, that's compelling evidence. Hair samples, if we ever get hair samples where we can take, that have the root part of it still attached, so that we can get DNA samples from it. If we can get, environmental DNA that can go along with these, all that extra evidence would go towards proof of existence. But, as far as science is concerned, we could have 100,000 eyewitness accounts that are from reliable people in the next 4 years, and it won't make a difference to science, because those are just anecdotal accounts. And like I said to myself, anecdotal accounts are never going to make me, or at least I don't believe it's going to make me suddenly say Sasquatch exists. It's going to have to be the hard evidence that you can test, and then you can reproduce those test results.
And I agree. I think exactly the same as you do on the subject. Although at the same time, I respect Thomas for what he does and has been doing and will be doing for many years to come. He's doing the chronicle. He's doing the facts as they are told to him. And he's making a log of it, and it's there for future reference to hopefully derive some additional evidence from down the road. And that's the best thing you can do with anecdotal evidence. It's just hang on to
I
it,
agree.
and maybe someday you'll pull it out and it'll make sense to you when you look at it.
And I agree totally, because Thomas can only go by the evidence that's presented to him.
Absolutely.
So Thomas, when somebody says, okay, this is what I've seen, he documents that. When he's found footprints, he's made casts of them where he could, or he's documented that. I'm sure if he found hair samples or somebody said, hey, here's hair samples, he would take that and try to get it tested. So I think guys like Thomas are a very important bridge. And John, guys like John Green had started it, where they collected the stuff, and not only did they collect it, but they also categorized it. John's original database was, as far as I'm aware, was the first database that somebody created for a cryptid species, and maybe somebody else had done it before him, but he's the first that I'm aware of.
That's the first one I'm aware of also.
And I think he started off in the days of WordPerfect, and probably.
Oh, it was all DOS. It was all DOS back then. You needed to be a computer programmer to do anything.
And I think that's where, like two examples of two people that we know. Okay, Bill Miller, who was a great researcher in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he was a wizard.
He was not a very good record keeper. And unfortunately,
no.
But when Bill passed away, there's a huge body of evidence that we've lost for all time.
Oh, yeah.
John Green, who was very good at evidence taking, I mean, he's left us a legacy. Myself and this Jay, who, we like to bug Thomas that, when he passes away, we're going to make the Thomas Memorial Sasquatch Museum. Thomas is great at keeping records. Now he's still in the Stone Age. He's still putting it on papyrus with a stylus. But
I'm getting him quills for his birthday the next time, and an inkwell.
Yeah, but I mean, the records he has is phenomenal. And I know, this Jay and I have a couple of weeks were at his place, and we were, just randomly going through some of his file folders, and the information that he's retained. I think even if Sasquatch turns out to not exist, I think for future generations that may be interested in the phenomena, I think guys like Thomas and that are going to be invaluable because of their record keeping.
Hey, dude, and that's what these podcasts are all about. Forget about the creature. There's lots of podcasts out there about the creature. I like to, get behind guys that are out there, boots to the ground, and gaining evidence wherever they can find it. And and to me, that I find that more interesting than Sasquatch itself, because there are some very devoted people involved in this, and some very good, highly skilled people involved in this. Okay, I think we'll just hold off and wrap it up for now for this segment of the podcast. And dear listeners, please tune in for part 2 of this conversation with the Bukwas Crew. Bill, Reid, Thomas Steenburg, and Gerry Matthews. And we'll continue with this discussion. Thank you for listening, and be back here again in 2 weeks for part 2. Okay, dear listener, that about wraps it up for now. My name is Gerry Matthews. You can reach me at yellowcoyote@telus.net. Thank you for your interest, and until the next time, keep searching.